This is When Science Speaks, a new web series profiling innovative and interesting people working in science and technical fields, from academia to industry to the nonprofit world. We explore how to be a powerhouse advocate for science and your research, how to advance your career in meaningful ways that make you happy, and how to push back on the ongoing assault on science and other related issues of interest happening in the world.
Hey everyone, it's Mark Bayer, and you are tuned to When Science Speaks. I'm so pleased to welcome Jordan Harbinger to the show today. Jordan has helped develop one of the leading self-improvement programs in the world with a special expertise in social capital, relationship building, and authentic rapport. He's also host of The Jordan Harbinger Show, where he interviews leading entrepreneurs, celebrities, writers, and experts about psychology, performance, life, and success. Welcome to the show, Jordan. It is so great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
Many of our listeners are PhDs, postdocs, and university leaders. And particularly during job searches, they're often advised to, quote, network, which is an activity that makes many of them cringe and run in the opposite direction. Relationship building is one of your areas of expertise. And you have this great free online course, which we'll link to in the show notes, called 6-Minute Networking. I've done it. Looks great. And when you talk about relationship building as compared to, say, networking, do you see any difference between those two things?
Yeah, candidly, I have a lot of respect for the cringe when it comes to this, because when people say you need to network, first of all, it's advice that's kind of like be taller. Okay, cool. Be confident. Great. What does that even mean? Nothing. Thanks. I can't put that into play. Bye. And especially for left brain folks like us, right? If I'm not switching the hemispheres, right? It just doesn't mean anything. And then also when we think of people who we know that network, we think of the annoying guy from Groundhog Day who sells insurance, or the used car salesman we got swindled by when we were 17, 18 years old. And we don't generally go, I want to be like that guy, that person. So we don't think of networking. It's a dirty word. And so I totally understand that. That's why I say relationship development. Mm-hmm. One, it's more specific, but two, it's a good euphemism for networking. But also it does redefine networking in that I'm not trying to build relationships when I need them, which is, so if you're trying to move up in your organization, regardless of what kind of organization, everything from the military to academia and beyond will use relationships. And if you don't believe me, think of a time that somebody got something that you thought maybe they didn't deserve based on a relationship, and that sort of proves my point, right? That networking is effective. The problem is that networking is seldom effective when you need to actually have that relationship in place. And what I mean by that is, on the Jordan Harbinger Show, I say dig the well before you're thirsty. And what that means is build relationships before you need them. So if you're like, oh, I really need to get in this area or get this promo or move on to this other project, and people say, you need to start networking, what they really mean is you should have started networking 5 years ago, 3 years ago, a year ago, whatever it is, because people work with other people that they know, like, trust, and you want to be in that circle. So if I get a call from somebody and they say, hey, Jordan, I want to be on your podcast, I go, cool, get in line, submit a PDF that I will never look at, but somebody on my team might look at in 3 or 4 months, and then delete, right? Not that I don't take pitches, but usually when somebody is pitching that hard, they've got a book and it's coming out next week and it's way too late for this. I will all read your pitch, but it's just not super effective. What's more effective is, hey, Jordan, I know we talk regularly every few months and I send you somewhat interesting stuff on certain topics on which I'm an expert and you're not, that you will also find interesting. By the way, this might be a good angle for your show, and here's the person who might be a good fit for it. And I go, thanks. And I call that person like that week, right, to find the topic, whether it's computer hacking and cybersecurity or something about North Korea or weapons smuggling, some topic like I would do on the Jordan Harbinger Show. Those people are bumped up in my inbox because I have a dialogue going with them. Doesn't mean they're the godfather of my kid, right? It just means that I have a dialogue going with them. And that makes all the difference. I'm far more likely to hire somebody who I've known even via email for a few months versus somebody who just slides into my ZipRecruiter inbox or whatever. I'm far more likely to want to deal with somebody, of course, who comes through a warm introduction from somebody I already know. That means 1,000 times more than the best crafted email pitch. It's just that's how things work for me, and that's how things work generally around pretty much anywhere. And what's really funny is, or ironic, I should say, is when you look at organizations that are designed to not allow for networking and relationship development to have career advancement, so you look at like super unionized businesses or government bureaucracies, they use networking even more because there's such a formalized system for this person has to get promoted before you because it's seniority, and the teachers union is going to go bananas if we do this. So that really uses networking because they don't want to get stuck with some schlep who happened to apply 48 hours before qualified people did. And
Right.
so they're like, okay, we have to get ahead of this. We have to circumvent the whole system. How do we do that? They use their informal network to do it. And
It-
that's why it's so important.
it-
Actually, the stricter your environment, the more important your network actually becomes. Military, for example.
Right. And I think you really put your finger on what really bugs people about the term networking is that it's transactional. It's you're using the other person. I sometimes say it's like the neighbor you have who only comes over to say hi when they want to borrow your shovel or your
Yeah.
rake or your thing. I was like, how do you feel about that person? I give it to him because it's like a small stakes thing and I want a good relationship with my next door neighbor, but I'm not going to go out of my way to help this person because I feel like they just want one thing and that's not really be friendly to me. It's just what I got in my garage.
Let me give you a note there on that too.
Yeah.
Then it's even more annoying when it's, oh, hi, Jim. Yeah, the kids are great. Yeah, it sure is cold outside. Do you need the snow shovel? Why are we still talking? Because it's just buttering you up and it becomes even more annoying. That's why digging the well before you're thirsty becomes even more important, because what's really irritating is somebody asking you for something out of the blue. But what's extremely irritating is somebody chatting with you like they actually cared about, gave a crap about you, and then 15 minutes later or 2 days later going, by the way, really could use your endorsement for this position. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, so our whole let's catch up for dinner was literally you just trying to get this. I would have appreciated it if you would have just asked for this because the answer is no, or the answer is yes. But now I feel like you literally didn't even care. Now I feel dumb for thinking you wanted to be my friend or you were chatting with me because you cared. So
Right.
it becomes even more ridiculously, like it's worse than just, hi, Mark, I will give you this money if you do this thing for me. That might be like, it's a little uncouth, but I'm going to pass, Jordan. But if I'm like, buddy, you're such a great guy, and you're like, Jordan really likes me. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, by the way, can you send me a free security audit for my IT systems? And it's just, oh, I'm an idiot. You're just using me. It's worse.
Yeah.
So you don't want to half-ass this because it's worse than doing it than no-assing it.
Yeah, don't do it. And you pointed out two things I just want to highlight, Jordan. One is like how to do this authentically, because you just mentioned how about an article that you might be interested in? Or I've got somebody great who could help you. I just connected somebody in Seattle with someone in Boston. I haven't met either of these people. And the Seattle person, yeah, I just connected with Carla and we're going to talk about this biotech apprenticeship program that they're interested in. And that was great. I feel good about that. I've done training with Carla. So there's a business relationship there, but hey, I thought it would be helpful for both. And it looks like there's value, which is something that this is the second thing I want to get to is delivering value to people, not when you need them. Right. And that's really a big theme of what you talk about in your 6-minute networking course.
Yeah, you're right. This is something that I'm huge on in all areas. You're right. This is the tricky spot where you said, oh, I introduced two people, but it probably wasn't just, hey, these two people are randomly in the same industry, so I should introduce them. That's a bad introduction.
Yeah.
A lot of people make bad introductions. And again, I don't want to go so far as to say it's worse than not making an introduction, but it's not great. It signals a lack of professionalism in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It can make you look bad. Look, I've introduced people and been like, oh my gosh, that was an abysmal failure. I'm so sorry. This person was really responsive when they wanted to work with me. They did a really good job on my thing. I don't know why they ghosted you after half the work was done. That's very weird. It's forgivable if you have a good reputation. Obviously, you want to avoid that. But you want to make sure that you are, of course, only introducing people that are going to do well for one another. At some point, it's outside of your control. But ideally, you only work with people that you can vouch for. A bad introduction is, I've never worked with you and I've never worked with them, and I only have a partial understanding of what they need, so I'm going to make the intro. I also get a lot of really annoying introductions that are like, Jordan, you should meet Tom. Tom really wants to start a podcast. And I'm like, why are you introducing your random friends to me who want to start a podcast? I don't want to sound like a jerk here to your listeners, but like there's a lot of things you can Google. There's YouTube videos you can watch.
Exactly.
I don't need to talk to Dan Rather to find out the news. I can just look at the news from other basic sources. I don't
Right.
need to talk to Oprah Winfrey to find out how to conduct an interview. You know what I mean? So don't like bug people with things that are outside of a certain pay grade. You know, the director of national cybersecurity for your country, don't introduce that person because your grandma's having trouble connecting to America online, right? That's not an appropriate introduction. And I know I'm sounding like a self-aggrandizing here, but the idea is to be ridiculous with it.
Right.
You want to make sure that the introductions make sense almost at the same status level. And this is flexible. It's not that I don't want to connect with a college student based on something, but you don't want to connect somebody who's 65 and the CEO of AT&T with somebody who wants to break into the industry. You can contact somebody who has 5 years in the game, who graduated from the same university and is 29 with that 24-year-old, right? You want to be a little bit careful about that. The other rule is that you want to use what's called the double opt-in, which means both parties have agreed that this introduction makes sense. Now, not only will this increase your rate of success, because, hey, if I ask you for permission and I ask them for permission, it's weird if you then don't respond. You know, what the hell? You told me I could make the intro. What kind of jerk are you now that you're not responding? But also, you know what's coming. You have a chance to say no. Because I might say, hey, Mark, I want to introduce you to Tom. He's great. And you might go, oh, hey, Jordan. So here's the thing. Tom emails me like every week. He's really annoying and follows me around at conferences. Don't put me in a position where I have to engage with him and it's in my inbox. And I go, oh my gosh, so sorry. Good thing I asked you.
Exactly.
Or you might say, yeah, Tom and we were roommates and we talk like every week. He lives down the street from me. And then if I had made that introduction, it would be like, thanks, delete. It's not bad. It doesn't make me look terrible, but it makes me look like you couldn't have asked if we knew each other already, you schmo. There's that. And then additionally, it just gets that buy-in. And it's like, maybe you don't have time right now. Sorry, I've just had a baby. I'm not really working on cybersecurity podcasts anymore. I don't really want to talk to Tom. Maybe in 6 months. Now's not a good time. So you don't want to throw an intro in someone's inbox because then they're the ones who have to say no. You're putting the monkey on their back. It's really awkward for me if somebody introduces somebody to me without my permission and then I go, hey, nice to meet you. Not super interested in this right now, but thanks. And it makes everyone awkward. So the person who got introed feels a little blown off. The person who made the intro looks like an a-hole because it was clearly they didn't have my permission to do that. And I also feel like a jerk because I had to tell this poor guy who I've never talked to in my life that I don't have time for him right now. And also I had to tell this other person indirectly that this introduction really wasn't welcome and was also poor form. And everyone loses. And you could have spent 5 minutes making sure that didn't happen. So that's why you need to do the double opt-in intro and get permission from everybody
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, and something that I say this too is what underlies what you're saying, Jordan, is just a little bit of research. And so say, hey guys, you're good at research. You do research all the time. Just do a little bit of research on this. Do the people already know each other? How could they fit and be complementary to each other? Where's the value there? Just do that before doing these other things you've described. But thanks for those specifics because they're so helpful when people are trying to think about, like, oh, I don't even know where to start. And this is a great way to get people launched and going right away. It leads to another question related to this. You wrote this article, which I really like, and I'd love for you to expound on it a bit. The big mistake people make about networking, they take themselves out of the game before they even begin. It's, oh, my network isn't big enough. And these are objections you raised in the article. And people buy into this, like what you call all or nothing thinking. My network's not big enough. I don't know people who are important enough people. I don't have any value that I could really add. But that's really not true. And you had some very specific things that you recommend that people who might be feeling those things could do to really get into the relationship building environment.
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of people do worry about, especially if maybe you're straight out of school and it's, I don't know anyone. I'm not rich. Why would anyone want to network with me? You start to build the network itself as your value proposition. So let's say that you are 24 and you're just graduating from school. No one's going to be like, I need to meet more college students that don't know anything about this role and don't know anything about my industry, right? That said no one ever. What's useful is if you start this process early and you've got quite a large Rolodex of people that maybe at least will take your email, now you start to become useful. So I get these emails from young people that say things like, hey, my neighbor, this is weird, but my neighbor or a guy at my gym I think was I can't remember exactly how this happened, but it was something along the lines of this guy who works out at my gym is a filmmaker, and he discovered a lost city in the jungle while trying to use new LiDAR technology to map the jungle floor based on like his researching of all these old legends and documents. And it sounds like Indiana Jones stuff, but he frickin' found a city in the jungle. And it was this massive archaeological find. And I can get the guy's story at the gym between sets, but you should have him on your podcast. And I did. Okay. So now this kid is like known to me as a guy who really has a feel for what's good for the show. And then this archaeological filmmaker, discovery Indiana Jones guy, he's connected well to the kid as well, right? So he's got a good relate. Thanks for introducing me to this media guy. And so I got a guest out of it. So everybody was really happy about this. And this guy just works out at the gym. He's not a Hollywood agent who had this guy in his client roster. He just kept his ears open. I routinely get emails from people that go, "Hey, I was listening to this Canadian Broadcasting Company podcast about hunting pedophiles online. It's pretty interesting. You might like it." I wrote back, "Hey, I listened to this while playing Xbox on Saturday. Really interesting. I can try and find the contact information for the lead officer in charge if that would be interesting." And I go, "That's a bunch of stuff I don't have to do. Sure, yeah, shoot it to me because it is an interesting show." And now this person is in my good graces and I'll answer their email any day because they've been very helpful. And I got a show out of the deal, or potentially. And so this type of stuff, type of legwork starts to become valuable to people. And they'll say, "I don't have anything to offer somebody like Mark Cuban." Nonsense. If you are among a bunch of young startup guys or something here in Silicon Valley and you're broke as hell, but you're sleeping on someone's floor and their idea is promising and they're doing a Series A, if you email Mark Cuban that, he's going to take your email and reply to you almost for sure. And he might even be really interested in it. So it's too early and not a good idea to think, "Oh, I don't know anyone," / "I'm not important," / "the people I do know are not important." That's always nonsense.
Yeah, and you really addressed an issue that I know a lot of listeners deal with because academia is so hierarchical. And it's like, I can't email this person. He's the chair, or she's the PI, and I'm just like beginning in this lab, or they're so well known, and what do I know? So these kind of ways of mind shifting with very specific examples are so helpful for our folks who are listening. I want to ask you, because we're in the second year of significant COVID precautions that are having an impact on in-person meetings. And you talk about ways of building relationships as a ladder, and in-person meetings, as you've explained, they're at the top of the ladder, but there are so many different ways of doing it. All these emails that you're describing and outreach that you got from people all over the place, and you haven't met them in person. So
Right.
I'm just wondering, how have you seen COVID impacting relationship building, if at all? And maybe any ways that have come to mind to this Zoom fatigue that many of us feel, which I see as just the lack of connection. Zoom is a platform. Obviously, we're using it right now, and it's very helpful. It's enabled us to connect over a long distance. But what kind of impact might that have on relationship building?
Yeah, people are always, "Oh no, we can't do the things the same way anymore because there are no mixers." Good riddance to mixers and cocktail hours and things like that. That's another thing people think of when they think of networking. They're like, "Oh God, I've got to go to this dumb thing and eat crappy stale cookies while everyone does a icebreaker after I've driven after work across town to park at the freaking YMCA." Like, no, I'm not doing this. That is bad networking. Like you said, they're on a hierarchy, on a ladder. Those sorts of networking mixer events that are uncurated, especially, are actually the worst way to network, because what you get when you go to a free meeting type thing like that is you get a bunch of people who are generally just unemployed that are like desperately seeking a job of some kind. I should clarify that. It's a sad way to go around meeting people, and it doesn't work because everyone in that situation is desperate and probably has nothing else to offer or is a taker. Now, that's going to exhaust you really quickly, even if you do find a gem in the rough. What I prefer greatly is online communication. Look, if you're a digital native, you're under 30 right now, you're like, duh, of course. But older people often are afraid or don't want to get started in networking because they think they've got to lose a few pounds and get a cocktail dress and start to become charming and brilliant and funny. And that's just not true at all. It doesn't really matter that way. If you go to a conference and things like that, great. In-person interaction is lovely. But for real, online networking, sending people an email occasionally, checking in with people, introducing people to one another is far more helpful than you showing up at the Learning Annex on Thursday nights for the I don't know, academia roundtable of people who happen to have nothing else to do at that time of day. So don't worry about in-person stuff at all. Yes, Zoom fatigue is a thing. I personally don't recommend doing a bunch of random Zoom calls with no agenda. I think people are on enough meetings. You don't really need to sit there and have, in the beginning of the pandemic, there was all these, let's do a cocktail hour where we all chat and hang out. And I was like, no, I'm on Zoom all day doing my show. This was before Zoom fatigue was a thing. You know, it was like the first couple months of the pandemic. People were like snacking and having cocktails, whatever. No, I'd rather just do this at scale. I don't want this to be exhausting for you or for me for that matter, but do it at scale. What I mean is I can send 100 emails a month introducing people to one another, checking in with people that I like and enjoy, trying to see if I can be helpful. I can't talk to 100 people on Zoom in a month. That would take the entire month. It would be awful. Remember when Clubhouse was a thing and people were spending like 30 hours a week on it? Who the hell wants to do that? That was a waste of time then. It would be even more of a waste of time now. Do this in a way that's scalable. The reason I call 6-Minute Networking, which is my free course on a lot of the stuff I'm talking about now, the reason it's called 6-Minute Networking is because, well, 5-Minute Networking was taken, but honestly, it takes 5 minutes a day. It's something where in the morning, I'm doing the drill where I send somebody a text every day with that certain script, or 4 people at text every day. Done. That's time I'd be wasting on Instagram. I can do it between sets at the gym if I want to. I do specific introductions each week that I have set targeted. I look for opportunities when I'm talking with people or meeting with people in other ways to find out how I can be helpful to them, etc. That's where the networking takes place. It's not, oh my gosh, all right, I've got my stupid 90-minute carve out on Mondays or on Fridays, whatever, where I quote unquote network and I dread it every week. No, this fits seamlessly into my life. It doesn't require anything other than organization. No more dedicated time, none of that stuff. It's just a set of habits and a way of being that cuts down on the workload and creates a lot of opportunity for me. Where normally, yeah, people would be standing in line at Starbucks or looking at Instagram, but instead they're checking in on somebody they haven't talked to in a decade. It's just a better use of the same time.
Yeah, and I just want to underline for listeners too. We talked a lot in the front of the interview about doing this authentically, creating value. Just because it's done at scale or you have a routine doesn't make it any less valuable, authentic, all those sorts of things. I think sometimes people think, oh, it's just like a process and there's really nothing behind it. But you've really taken a lot of time up front to explain how you're doing this with the best interests of the folks that you're reaching out to in mind, as well as your own. So it's like everybody wins, like the one you described with the Lost Jungle City. I think that's
Yeah,
I
the
have to
Lost City in the Jungle, yeah.
encourage people to look at that episode. Jordan, as we're wrapping up, I want to mention that you've got a young baby at home. Congratulations to you and your
Thank you.
wife. And I was just saying, I can empathize with a lot of those challenges, trying to fit everything involved with the baby into the house and your professional life. Many of our listeners have demanding jobs also, and they're facing similar squeeze with or without newborns. And so as we wrap up, love for you to just opine on any strategies that you've developed aimed at finding the right balance with all these different competing responsibilities that you have.
Sure. Like I said, the 6-Minute Networking fits into your life in a way that it already exists. So whenever people say, oh, I don't have time for it, it's the most quintessential example of a nonsense excuse. I understand if somebody is a single mom with 2 kids and they don't have time to work out because that requires focus and working with somebody where there's no kids in their hands, that might literally be impossible for them to accomplish. But when you're talking about something that can be done all from your phone in 5 minutes a day, that doesn't even require getting on an actual phone call, if you're not doing it, you're just you're willfully ignorant of the secret game that is being played around you. In my opinion, you don't get to complain that other people are getting ahead and that it's all about who you know if you refuse to spend 30 minutes a week trying to be the person that knows everyone or that can connect other people. Like, it's just kind of BS. And so for me, yes, I have 2 kids and I spend 5 hours a day with them. I'm not like that guy who ignores his kids because I'm on my phone with random people across the world on a Zoom call. I simply, when I go to the bathroom, maybe that's when I send those texts. Or when my kid is taking a nap, even if they want me to sleep with them because they're little, maybe that's when I go through and I email those 5 people each week or make email introductions, things like that after they go to bed. It's 5 minutes. So after the kids go to bed, I can spend 5 minutes doing that, for crying out loud. So this is designed to fit into a busy person's life. And frankly, In closing here, I don't know anyone that's really successful that doesn't work on their relationships a lot, but I know tons of people that should be way more successful that don't work on their relationships a lot. And I think, frankly, that's the reason why.
Yep. Yep. So true. The one sentence that I remember from grad school is relationships are primary, everything else is derivative. And I really feel that's the way it goes. We're wired for that. Jordan Harbinger, it's been so fantastic to have you on, have you share your nuggets of wisdom. I know that our listeners are going to benefit. Encourage everyone to check out Jordan Harbinger's show. We'll have information on exactly how to do that in the show notes. Thanks, Jordan, for being here.
Thanks so much, man. Appreciate the opportunity.
And listeners, thank you so much for being along on this episode of When Science Speaks. And I hope you will be back next time for the next episode of When Science Speaks.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to click subscribe. Check us out on the web at whensciencespeaks.com, and we'll see you next time.